In the quiet suburb of Elkins Park, north of Philadelphia, the Rabinowitz household was usually calm and peaceful. But on the evening of April 29, 1997, everything changed. Stephanie Paula Newman, a young lawyer with a bright future, had spent the day with her mother getting ready for her daughter Haley's first birthday. The night seemed normal, with Stephanie, her husband Craig, and their baby enjoying a nice dinner with her parents at a fancy Thai restaurant. After returning home, the family went about their usual routine. Stephanie went upstairs to relax with a bath, while Craig watched a hockey game downstairs. As midnight drew near, the calm was shattered by Craig's panicked 911 call. He said he had found his wife unconscious in the bathtub, appearing to be the victim of a terrible accident. Emergency responders arrived quickly, only to find a scene that would uncover a dark and twisted plot. Stephanie Newman was born on June 3, 1967, in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Stephanie grew up in a Jewish family led by her parents, Louis Herman Newman and his wife Annie. She had two siblings. Philadelphia is known for its significant historical, cultural, and artistic contributions, a quieter life away from the city's hustle and bustle. Stephanie was raised in Elkins Park, a suburb north of Philadelphia, where she quickly showed herself to be both beautiful and intelligent. At a young age, she began studying the Torah, the compilation of books that contain Jewish law and heritage, and she performed public readings, which require very specific intonations. Stephanie was active, extroverted, and sociable, never one to stay still, according to those close to her. At 16, she started working as a counselor at a girls' summer camp during her summer break. It was there she met Craig Rabinowitz, who worked at a nearby boys' camp. Craig, born on September 28, 1963, was 4 years older than Stephanie. Little is known about his early life, except that he was the son of an executive of a prominent clothing manufacturer. Craig frequently visited Stephanie's camp due to his responsibilities, and they started talking. Eventually, he asked her out, and although she was initially hesitant, something changed after their second date. From then on, the couple became inseparable, maintaining their relationship for 7 years. Stephanie's romance did not affect her academic performance. She was diligent in her studies, graduating from high school with a National Merit Scholarship. She went on to earn a degree from Bryn Mawr College, a private women's liberal arts college. After graduating, she enrolled at Temple University to study law. Craig finished high school as an average student, excelling in sports like ice hockey and baseball. He also attended Temple University but dropped out after his first semester. After their long courtship, Stephanie and Craig married in June 1990. With the help of Stephanie's parents, they moved into an apartment. Stephanie's new role as a wife did not hinder her academic pursuits, and she graduated from law school in 1992 with excellent grades. Around the same time, Craig and a friend started a company called C&C Vending, which imported latex gloves for medical use from Malaysia. The company made a few sales before dissolving, but Craig continued in the same business, registering a new company called C&C Supplies. He explained to his in-laws and friends that he would import containers of gloves from Malaysia to sell wholesale, estimating a 33% profit margin. To maximize profits, he needed $88,000 to import 4 containers. The figures he presented were impressive, and he easily convinced Stephanie's parents and one of her brothers to invest in the business, as well as some of his friends. While Craig seemed headed for success, Stephanie was also making strides. After graduating, she took the bar exam, a challenging test for law graduates to practice in the United States. Stephanie passed on her first attempt, and combined with her excellent grades, this did not go unnoticed. She quickly received an attractive job offer from a prestigious law firm with a salary she couldn't refuse. Stephanie had clear dreams and aimed to own a home in a good neighborhood. After 4 years of marriage, the couple moved in with her parents to save money for a down payment on their first house. This dream came true when they moved into a cozy 2-story home in Marion, on Philadelphia's Main Line. This upper-middle-class neighborhood was home to professionals, bankers, executives, and entrepreneurs, many of whom were part of the local Jewish community. With a new life goal achieved, Stephanie's dreams were nearly complete, needing only a child to crown them. It wasn't long before this wish came true with the arrival of a healthy and beautiful baby girl named Haley Sarah Rabinowitz. To everyone, they seemed like the perfect family. Stephanie, a promising lawyer with a rising career, Craig, a businessman owning an import company, and their lovely daughter completing the picture. Neighbors had no complaints, often seeing Craig strolling around with Haley in her stroller. The perfect life, however, was short-lived. As we often see, perfect lives rarely exist, and what appeared to be Stephanie's dream fulfillment soon came to an end. On Tuesday, April 29, 1997, Stephanie and her mother went out in the morning to shop for Haley's first birthday preparations. That evening, Craig, Stephanie, and the baby had dinner at a luxurious Thai restaurant with Stephanie's parents, Lua and Annie. After a delightful meal, they all returned home, with some accounts suggesting everyone went to Craig's house. Upon arrival, Craig mentioned he had too much coffee and felt jittery, so he decided to take Haley for a walk in her stroller. When he returned, his in-laws had already left. After putting Haley to bed, Stephanie and Craig had a beer in the living room before Stephanie went upstairs to take a bath. Meanwhile, Craig stayed downstairs watching a hockey game featuring the local team, the Flyers. Around midnight on April 29, 1997, Craig made a frantic 911 call, reporting an accident. He claimed his wife had fallen in the bathtub, and he found her unconscious and couldn't revive her. Minutes later, the first police officers arrived at the Rabinowitz house, finding the door open and announcing their presence as they entered. They heard Craig's shouts from upstairs and found him holding Stephanie's head above water while her body was submerged in the bathtub. The officers helped lift Stephanie from the tub and attempted resuscitation, trying to restore her consciousness. The commotion woke Haley, who began to cry, and the police told Craig to attend to her. Craig soon returned with Haley in his arms as the paramedics arrived to take over. Stephanie was still unconscious, her body cold and blue. The police informed Craig he needed to come with them, but he was unsure what to do with the baby. At that moment, neighbors, noticing the police activity, offered to stay with Haley. An officer questioned Craig about what happened, and he explained that after dinner with his in-laws, he had a drink with his wife, who then went for a bath to relax since she had trouble sleeping. He stayed watching the hockey game but heard a thud from the bathroom that sounded like a shampoo bottle falling. Not concerned at first, as this often happened to Stephanie, he eventually went to check after she didn't return for over half an hour. He found her unconscious and fully submerged in the water, tried to revive her, and when he couldn't, called 911. He opened the front door for the responders and held her head above water as he couldn't lift her from the tub. Craig's clothes were wet, so the officer advised him to change. Meanwhile, the officer noticed the tub draining, likely dislodged when they moved Stefani's body. He replaced the plug, aware the scene needed preservation for any potential investigation. The officer also recalled the bathroom floor was completely dry, with no water outside the tub, which stuck in his mind. After changing clothes, Craig was taken to the hospital where Stephanie had been transported. He was informed that despite their efforts, Stephanie was declared dead at 1:29 a.m. Overwhelmed, Craig held his head, repeatedly saying he couldn't believe it and expressed he couldn't go through such loss again, referencing his father's death from cancer 3 years earlier. Craig then faced the daunting task of notifying family and friends about the tragic accident. When Stephanie's parents arrived at the hospital and confirmed her death, Annie collapsed in her husband's arms. They soon began asking when Stephanie's body would be released, as Jewish tradition requires burial as soon as possible, preferably within 24 hours. However, they faced a significant problem. The certifying doctor deemed an autopsy necessary, finding it unusual for a healthy 29-year-old woman to die from a bathtub fall without any visible injuries. This not only delayed the burial but also conflicted with their religious customs, which prohibit desecration of the deceased's body. Additionally, this delayed the period known as Shiva, the 7-day mourning period observed by family members who stay at home, refrain from any form of entertainment, and even cover mirrors to show they are not concerned with their physical appearance. However, the coroner's stance was firm and unyielding, forcing the family to accept it. The autopsy took place in the morning, conducted by the county's deputy medical examiner. By the time the doctor examined Stephanie's body, 12 hours had passed since the emergency was reported. At that time, the situation had changed considerably. The experienced coroner first noticed petechial hemorrhages, small red spots that appear when tiny blood vessels bleed internally. These can be caused by certain illnesses, prolonged effort, medication, or criminal actions like asphyxiation. In Stephanie's case, petechiae were present around her eyes, and that wasn't all her body revealed. As time passed, deep bruises became visible on both sides of her neck and under her jaw. Additionally, she had bruises on her arms and legs, particularly around her knees and elbows. These injuries were difficult to explain as the result of a simple fall in the bathtub. Moreover, the stomach contents examination showed undigested food, suggesting that death occurred around 9:30 p.m., more than 2 hours before Craig called emergency services. At this point, the only suspect for any potential wrongdoing against Stephanie was her husband, as he had assured the police that only he, his wife, and their baby were home, with all doors and windows securely locked. Another detail noted by the first responding officer was that Stephanie was in the bathtub wearing all her jewelry, which is unusual for someone taking a bath. When she was removed from the tub, she was still wearing her earrings, 2 gold bracelets, one with stones, her wedding ring, and even a gold watch. This, along with the dry bathroom floor, didn't match Craig's story about his supposed efforts to lift her from the tub. The authorities quickly launched an investigation, re-inspecting the Rabinowitz residence and confirming nothing was stolen, and there were no signs of forced entry. During this search, they found a bottle of the medication, which contains zolpidem, used for treating sleep problems. Craig stated that both he and his wife had been prescribed this medication due to their sleeping issues. Once the post-mortem studies were completed, Stephanie's body was released to her family for burial, which took place at Mount Lebanon Cemetery. While the family was still grappling with their loss, Another shocking event occurred. Just hours after the funeral, Craig was arrested as a suspect in his wife's death. In the following months, Stephanie's parents offered $75,000 for Craig's bail, but some sources claim the bail was set at $5 million. The case took another twist when the police received an anonymous tip suggesting they look into Delilah's Den, a luxurious local gentlemen's club, for information on Craig. Following this lead, the investigators researched the Rabinowitz residence, finding a hidden space in a closet ceiling with a movable panel. Inside, they discovered several men's magazines, a bag full of receipts, and what appeared to be a handwritten ledger. To make sense of the documents, the investigators called in a certified public accountant to organize and interpret the vast amount of financial data. While these studies were ongoing, detectives pursued the anonymous tip at Delilah's Den. There, they learned that Craig was a well-known regular, frequenting not only the general services but also the exclusive champagne room where dancers performed personalized sessions. It became evident that Craig had a particular affinity for an exotic dancer named Summer, whose real name was Shannon Reinert, a 24-year-old who lived with her 2 children. Shannon was located and questioned, confirming Craig was a frequent client who bought her gifts, including jewelry and furniture for her home. She admitted they had met outside the club but insisted their relationship was purely platonic, involving companionship rather than intimacy. Shannon revealed that Craig had confided in her about marital problems, saying he cared for Stephanie but no longer loved her, adding that leaving her would bankrupt him. Additionally, it was discovered that on the night of Stephanie's death, Craig had called Shannon to inform her of his wife's passing, a call that deeply saddened the dancer. But these discoveries paled in comparison to the revelations of the public accountant who examined the papers found at the Rabinowitz house. According to bank and credit card records, in the 9 months before the incident, Craig had spent a staggering $156,000 at the Gentlemen's Club. From January to April 1997 alone, he incurred $29,000 in charges at Delilah's Den, with an average of 3 visits per week, spending over $2,000 each week. Craig's gifts to Shannon included not only furniture for her living room, dining room, and nursery worth about $8,500, but also expensive presents like a Tiffany's pearl necklace costing over $1,900, which he did not give to his wife on Valentine's Day. Additionally, Craig had purchased 2 memberships to an exclusive sports club for himself and Shannon, each costing $365, plus $136 monthly for laundry services, shoe polishing, and lockers in the VIP section. He also spent a small fortune on fine clothing for his favorite dancer. Contrary to Shannon's claim that there was no intimate relationship, Craig's bank records showed frequent stays at 5-star hotels, averaging $500 per night, always registering with Shannon and using the rooms for only a few hours. Moreover, with all the money Craig was squandering, one would assume his latex glove import business was thriving. But investigations revealed that the company had conducted transactions between 1990 and 1992, but no activity was recorded thereafter. No contracts, no purchases, no sales. In short, the business didn't exist. So where did all the money come from? It turned out Craig had been running a Ponzi scheme, named after Charles Ponzi, who famously carried out such a plan in the 1920s in the United States until it was discovered. This pyramid scheme involves promising investors good returns from legitimate economic activities, but these returns are paid from the funds of new investors. Craig had drawn in Stephanie's family, friends, and others. Initially, things went well because Stephanie earned a good salary. However, after giving birth, she wanted to spend time with the baby, and arranged with her law firm to halve her workload, resulting in a proportional decrease in income, amounting to only $33,000 annually at the time of the incident, insufficient to sustain the couple's lifestyle. This also made Craig's lavish tastes and financial maneuvers unsustainable. He was aware of the high probability of his schemes being exposed. In a final move, following Haley's birth, Craig took out 2 insurance policies, one for Stephanie worth over $1.5 million and another for himself worth $1.6 million. These policies were in addition to Stephanie's coverage from her law firm, which insured her for $500,000 and her husband for $150,000. According to the accountant's analysis, the calculations were simple, written in Craig's handwriting. In the event of Stephanie's death, Craig would receive over $2 million. This amount would allow him to settle about $700,000 in debts to his investors and keep around $1.5 million. He planned to retain $400,000 and place $1 million in a bank account whose interest would yield over $60,000 annually, allowing him to live comfortably. Shortly after his wife's death, Craig pawned several of her jewelry pieces, including her wedding ring, obtaining $2,200. Additionally, it was reported that he pawned jewelry inherited by Stephanie from her great-grandmother shortly after her death. Moreover, the papers stored by Craig showed that the couple had bought their house 2 years earlier for $230,000 but had since taken out 2 mortgages totaling $300,500, along with some loans from friends. In the second half of 1997, a preliminary hearing was held to determine if there was enough evidence to prosecute Craig for his wife's death. The case was presented by the first assistant district attorney, who explained the Ponzi scheme and how, at the time of the incident, Craig knew his lies were unsustainable. According to the prosecution, one theory was that Stephanie was sedated with a triple dose of Ambien, a medication prescribed only to Craig. Based on bruises found on Stephanie's right side, one hypothesis was that she died elsewhere in the house and was dragged up the stairs to be placed in the bathtub. Another possibility was that, after administering an excessive dose of the sleep medication, Craig carried her to the bathroom to drown her in the tub once she fell asleep. He undressed the body, forgetting to remove the jewelry, and placed her in the water. Possibly, the contact with the water woke Stephanie, causing her to struggle, prompting her husband to strangle her, a process that likely took about 4.5 minutes. During the struggle, she likely injured her elbows and knees against the sides of the tub. The prosecutor revealed that a book about mortuary topics was found on Craig's nightstand, which stated that only 13% of deaths are subject to autopsy. This led him to believe that, coupled with religious considerations, the odds were in his favor, prompting him to take a calculated risk, not anticipating an unyielding coroner. It was also discovered that Craig planned to flee after his wife's funeral, as a suitcase with thousands of dollars in cash was found in the trunk of his car. Court documents revealed that years earlier, Craig had been detained during an investigation into a prostitution ring in Philadelphia, but received immunity in exchange for his testimony in a 1993 trial, already married to Stephanie. Meanwhile, Craig's defense tried to bring up a supposed man who had knocked on a neighbor's door asking for directions, but the police confirmed that Craig was the only man at the Rabinowitz house, something he had himself affirmed, and there were no signs of forced entry. The calculations in Craig's handwritten ledger about what he would receive upon his wife's death and how he would spend it left no doubt that the act was premeditated. The revelations during this process left Stephanie's family and friends in shock. The attorney representing Stephanie's parents, Louis and Annie, read a statement saying they were overwhelmed by the information uncovered. They believed they knew Craig, but it was clear they had been deceived, just like everyone else he had spoken to. Friends and family thought he was a wonderful husband and father. They had even helped with nearly $100,000 for his so-called import business. The prosecution maintained that Craig's situation had reached a breaking point. His credit cards were maxed out, the house was over-mortgaged, and friends and family expected returns from his non-existent business. Admitting the truth would mean his life was destroyed. Instead, ending his wife's life would allow him to clear his debts and fulfill his fantasy with Summer. Later, Craig's defense attempted to have the fraud and murder charges tried separately, but this was not accepted. The trial was set to begin on October 30th, 1997. When the trial date arrived, unfortunately, Louis, Stephanie's father, had passed away a month earlier and could not be present. On the first day of the hearing, everything changed. Craig pleaded guilty to killing his wife to obtain the insurance money. Shaking and sobbing, he claimed he decided to confess after a dream where his wife, father, and father-in-law approached him, placing their hands on his shoulders, telling him it was time to do the right thing. He added that he couldn't subject his family and his 17-month-old daughter to such a painful process. Before finishing his statement, Craig admitted that his life had become a sham, a counterfeit, and a fraud, and the hole he was digging grew deeper and deeper. What was right became wrong and vice versa. He added that his life was on a slippery, steep path, and he had no excuses to offer. Following his statement, the judge sentenced Craig Rabinowitz, 34, to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the murder of his wife, Stephanie Rabinowitz. According to his prison records, last updated on May 15, 2024, Craig remains incarcerated at the State Correctional Institution in Pennsylvania. In his mugshot taken in October 2022, at 58 years old and with a shaved head, he no longer looked as glamorous as in 1997. He is now 60 years old. Further details emerged during the investigations, such as the couple's return to Louis and Annie's home supposedly to save money for their dream house. In reality, they had been evicted from their apartment and were being sued for $6,000 plus legal fees, a debt Stephanie's parents eventually paid. Beyond the financial details lies the reality of Haley Sarah, who grew up with a father in prison and a deceased mother. She turned one the day her mother was buried and had to adjust to a new environment, new faces, and arms different from her mother's warm and loving embrace. Stephanie's maternal grandparents took care of Haley, and after her husband's death, Annie received family support to help shoulder the responsibility. Financial provisions were made for Haley's future. The funeral announcement requested contributions to an account in her name. Stephanie's law firm also established a trust fund for her. The house where the tragedy occurred, which became a site of curiosity for journalists and locals, sold easily in just 4 weeks for $225,000, only $5,000 less than they paid in 1995, but about $25,000 below market value due to its dark past. The sale proceeds were used entirely to pay off the mortgages on the property. In a twist of justice, Stephanie's life insurance money, which Craig had planned to use to solve his problems, was placed in a trust for Haley's future. A year after the incident, Philadelphia Weekly interviewed Craig in prison. He claimed Stephanie made him feel controlled and emasculated, describing her as overly orderly and rule-bound, while he preferred going with the flow, suggesting Stephanie was practically to blame for her own death. He also stated that if released, the first thing he would do is find Shannon. However, it seemed Shannon did not share his passion, as he reportedly wrote to her several times without receiving a response. Despite everything, It is clear that Stephanie was a wonderful, intelligent young woman who dreamed of marrying a good partner, having a home and raising a baby. Yet Craig's selfishness, ambition, and lust turned these dreams into a nightmare, not just for Stephanie's loved ones, but also for their own daughter. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.